Nancy Espitallier used to live next door to me many years ago. After she moved away, we lost connection until I found her on Facebook and realized she has special gifts. She is a professional psychic, medium, and energy healer who brings all three modalities together to connect and communicate with animals as well as people. In this month's forum, she shares how her journey began and how her work has evolved over the years. And I hope you have questions. If time allows, Nancy will also offer a live reading or two. So, Nancy, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mary. And I really appreciate our reconnecting because I had no idea you were into any of this stuff either. So it's like small world, not small world, I don't know. So yeah, it's very, very cool. Um, so uh, 10 years ago, I quit my corporate job and wasn't the plan to do this for a living, but it is what I do now. So in my practice, in my business, animal communication is probably maybe about 15% of it, but I noticed like lately it's becoming more. And you know, it's not like I set out to, well, it's not like I set out to do any of this. Like it was just kind of evolved. And that's what I wanted to talk about is kind of, I think once you start going down the rabbit hole in this, it's like as I'm sure you guys have discovered, it just takes you in all these directions. But Mary in particular wanted me to talk about the animal communication part of it or the animal aspect of it. So for me, by happenstance, I was in Oakland in a shopping center having dinner, and the Berkeley Psychic Institute was having a psychic fair. And I was intrigued, my friends, not so much, but I went in, I had a palm reading, which I don't remember anything about. I guess it was okay. But then they do a little brief 10-minute energy healing. And I could like feel something. And that was like, what is this? Because I felt like for me, my journey up until that point with therapy and 12-step programs for adult children of alcoholics, like all these different things I was doing to feel happier in my life, everything was about healing. So now here's energy healing. And it was like, what the heck is this? So of course they suggest I take a class, and so my first class, and I've been a long time meditator, but mostly around health reasons. I wasn't particularly spiritual, or wouldn't have called myself that. I don't know, maybe in California we all are a little bit, but I wasn't pursuing anything. And so I took a woman's intuition class, and it was all like everyone saying, "Oh, everyone's psychic. You can do this." And it's like, fine, you guys be psychic. I just want to understand more about this energy. And then the next class I took was a healing one class from them. And in that class, you get a spirit that you connect with. They assign you, they pick you, and I don't even remember how it works. It's like 25 years ago. So in healing one, you get the spirit to work with, and then you practice, right? Giving healings, just like any other healing modality. And then I ended up shortly after taking healing two, because it was fascinating. And then you get another healing master to work with. So my first one was on energy. The second one focused more on the physical. And the whole thing of which I'm sure, because I tell you, like you're here because you're interested in all of this, that when you're connecting with any kind of energy, that it's like trusting what you get, whether you're talking to your spirit guides or you're picking up something from a person, or even just going to a room and you're feeling a certain way, like just kind of trusting like what it is. And so the big thing was like, okay, well, I can do what you tell me to do. For some crazy reason, I can kind of see these guys, which that I could never really explain, but it's like, okay, I'm going with it. But then in practicing the healings there, that's when I started a little bit to learn to trust, because, I'd be at a Golden Gate Park, I was giving healings, that was my job, and somebody's talking about their back really hurts and can I work on their back? And all I keep hearing in my head is ask him about his shoes, ask him about his shoes. And then I say something like his shoes, and he goes, oh God, they're terrible. And I'm a security guard and I'm on my feet all day. And it was like, oh, your back is fine. You just need new shoes. But, you know, I felt like a crazy person going, what about your shoes? You know, what's happening? So I was just doing this for myself. And then there'd be like maybe 8 months in between classes. But the healing class was just practicing healing myself. My wallet was a big one at the time. My pets, I've, you know, had mostly have dogs, but I've had cats in the past, and I've always had a bird in there somewhere. Um, and and so it's that similar thing of when I'm giving a healing, I'm getting information. Now, it might be from the healing master, that spirit guide who's giving me the information, but it's the information about either something around their health or just something they want to say. And the more I practice it in general, not particularly about pets or animals, but just practicing in general, that, you know, that information gets clearer. And it really wasn't, I mean, it was what, like 5 years off and on. I would take a class, and then I moved to Sacramento, and I ended up connecting with a healer and a medium and a psychic, and she had monthly like get-togethers where it was like the same 6 or 7 people. We'd meet up and give each other healings, and then whatever information we got. So I was pretty comfortable with the healing part, not that comfortable with the information. But it turned out to be good because two of the other women were, you know, had a lot of skill. And, you know, I would see something or think something, and I'd be like, oh, that, you know, that's weird. You know, that doesn't fit. And then they would say it. And so I learned to trust. Now with people, you know, if you're doing it, like they can tell you, like you say, oh, does it hurt on your right side? You know, and they'll be like, oh, yes. And I don't consider myself a medical intuitive at all. Like I don't know where anything goes, but in the energy, I can see things that don't fit. I'm sure like most of you. Um, so what kind of evolved with animals is I never like brought it up like, oh, this is what I do, because it's really hard to validate, right? Because animals can't say, oh yeah, you're right, you know, you got that, my neck was really bothering me, like you. So that I don't know, fear of being wrong, have some perfectionist issues, you know, all that stuff, it made animals a little bit harder to like be confident about, I guess. But initially it would just be like I was volunteering for a horseback riding program for disabled kids, and there was one horse that they kind of took out of the program because he wasn't acting right. And I was like, you know, horse people are very open to energy healing, you know, they're very open to energy stuff. And so I was like, well, do you mind if I give him a healing? And they're like, sure, you know, we'll take whatever. And so I wasn't that confident, but then this person, one of the people who feeds the horses, came walking up, and he just like backed up. All of a sudden he got tense, and then he's saying that, nope, can't trust her, can't trust her. And I was like, ooh, this is weird. And it was also weird because the person like saw me notice what the horse was doing. And so then I did say something. I'm like, look, you know, I'm no expert, but I'm telling you what I got. And the person, you know, the person running it said, you know, we've been wondering about that, because I guess there's been other things. So that was like the first time I really felt like I got information that validated something, and they made some changes. Um, and you know, and it helped the horse to be heard. Um, and then one of the other times, which I went to Chicago to visit my younger sister. She was enamored with all this because in, you know, the Midwest, like nobody's talking about this stuff. So um, she was um, not house sitting, but she was checking on a dog for a neighbor that was on vacation, and they had left one of their dogs. And she's like, he's terrible. He's like pooping all over the, you know, the rumpus room that they have him in. And he seems upset all the time. Like, can you find out what it is? It's like, well, it seems kind of obvious. His family's on vacation. But as soon as I don't even think I like got into a zone or anything. He was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, let me tell you what's going on. He was like so telling the story how, you know, he doesn't fit in, they don't want him, the other dog never lets him catch the ball when they throw it, it's horrible, and he's really young, and he's just like, I think they left me, I don't think they're coming back. And I mean, it was just blah, 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 all this stuff. And so I was telling her, I said, you know, he says they don't want him, like they act like they don't want him. And then she told me, like, the husband just showed up with the dog, just brought it home, and the wife didn't want him, and their other dog was the favorite. That was a dog that went on vacation with them. And I said, well, do you know if, like, when they play with the dogs outside, that the other dog, you know, maybe kind of bullies them a little bit, or doesn't let them play? And she goes, oh yeah, totally, they joke about it. But it's so defeating to the dog, you know, to never catch a ball. And also the energy of the people, like he knew he wasn't wanted. And with that information, I mean, I told her, like, be nice, but when they got back, she told them what I got out of it, and they ended up rehoming the dog, which was the best thing that could have happened. So, and again, this was just me. I was still doing my corporate job, you know, wasn't into this, but it was pretty, I don't know, pretty powerful. And I'm not sure that, you know, it was pretty obvious he was unhappy, but to know that, like, they pick up all our stuff, that it can make, you know, make some sort of a difference. So when I started actually doing healing work, which has always been my primary thing of doing energy healing work, but also readings, and then I guess about 10 years ago, I, on a healing journey, I went to Peru to do ayahuasca. And when I came back, I could talk to dead people. So that was new. And then it was like a year later, I quit my job because now, like, I couldn't do that anymore. I don't, it was wild. So there was a plan all along, I guess, when I was taking those. So with the animal side of it, it it's like I do the same thing that I do for people when I'm giving them healing. Is I approach it as a healing, and then I pick up what I pick up in their body, which sometimes tell the story, and then I ask them, like, almost always with pets, I'll ask them, like, do you like your food? How do you, you know, how do you like where you live? Because, you know, a lot of people want to know, like, are they happy? Do they, you know, do they need anything? And then, of course, I get a lot of behavior issues, primarily with cats. Um, and I'm not a behaviorist, so I'm not a dog trainer, an animal trainer. So it's not like I can tell them maybe what to do to fix it. But but many times, you know, if a cat's peeing on their favorite chair all the time or in their bed, there's always something up. Like, there's a reason, like there's, you know, a neighbor's cat that's coming in. They're like, oh yeah, neighbor's cat's coming in their yard. It's like, no, the neighbor's cat can't come in the yard, not for your cat, because now it's stressed, right? So oftentimes it's that. Sometimes it is a physical problem, like they're sick or something's going on and they want more information. So again, I'm not a vet, and also I have to explain to them that their pet is not a vet either. So it may not be able to tell them, like, technically what's wrong with them. They can only share what they're experiencing. Um, but I have, it was nice to think about preparing for this. So, you know, I do dogs and cats is probably most of it, but I've done a number of horses, helped an owner of a horse who uh, wasn't eating and losing a lot of weight, and it was an older one, and there had been a problem in their mouth, and that was the first time, like, I didn't always check animals' mouths. That was like one of the things. I do their body and everything else. But with this horse, she said, well, it did have a problem. And we kept going back to the same spot. And she finally got the vet to come out and really investigate it. And that was the problem. The horse just couldn't eat. And she thought it was because he was getting old and really sick, but he wasn't sick. He just couldn't eat. So it even though I'm not medically looking at it, it can direct somebody somewhere. So I have a lot of horses, but one of my favorite ones was a snake. I was doing a psychic fair, and I was there doing animal stuff because I had lots of other psychics doing people stuff. So it was like an opportunity. This was early in my practice to get out there. And so somebody wanted to know why their snake didn't seem to be happy. I was like, well, how the heck do you know if a snake isn't happy? But if you have snakes, I'm sure you would know maybe. And the snake came through saying, like, stop messing with my cage. Like she was always fixing it up and thinking, well, he's unhappy because, these rocks are over there or the light needs to be there. And so the snake was like, stop moving things around because it couldn't ever settle. So that one was interesting. And snakes, very smart. And then I have a friend who has, and I uh, thought to reach out too late, but I don't know what kind of lizard it is. But she's maybe, about this big. Oh my God, so smart and with so much to say. And how much she loves her family. And the husband is particularly like, this is his girl. Like there's a little love fest going on between the two of them, and he sneaks her treats. But she, every time I go there now, it's like I kind of forget she's there because her cage is kind of off, and then all of a sudden I like, ooh, she's like, hey, come on over, I got something to say. She's very smart. And then I've done a number of birds. So you know uh, birds are uh, birds are also smart, and they're very specific, like what they have to say, and it's always all about them. A little bit like cats, but birds kind of even more so. Um, and then I wanted to talk about something that happened that was something new that I learned. Is I don't know if any of you have heard about Penelope Smith, but she's like the guru of animal communication. She's actually originally out of the Bay Area. I think she is still there, and she's still teaching, but she's gone like all over the world to talk to animals and whales, and you know, people call on her. She has a blog that is really interesting. Um, but I was 5 years ago in 2020, I had to move, and it was the middle of pandemic, so the pickings were kind of slim. And also now I was a psychic medium with my own business, not a corporate person. So beggars can't be choosers, right? So the house I ended up in, which it's fine, but it hadn't been lived in a while. I didn't know that. Um, till later, but there was just a lot of things wrong with it when I moved in. Like a lot of the outlets didn't work. I'm just telling you, it was just a lot of things that they had. And the landlord was great. He was coming in and repairing everything. But one of the big things is there had been a pipe leaking under the house. So there was a bad smell. And so when they realized that it had kind of flooded under the house, there was a lot of activity under there to fix it and, check the other pipes. And then I had a terrible ant problem. So ants coming not surprisingly into the kitchen. And then I, put out the ant, bait traps and feel like that I got that under control. And then they'd be in the bathroom. Okay. So they're coming in for water or whatever. And this is in addition to all these other things that, like the heat went out for a couple of weeks. And I mean, it just seemed like it was never ending. And I had moved from a home in Natomas, which was beautiful, kind of a brand new house. I've been there 13 years, but the owners decided to sell. So I didn't move because I wanted to. So there was that energy of that I was resisting being in my new place, and all this stuff going wrong. And then I'm sitting in my office working, and ants are crawling up my leg, and I feel defeated. And I don't necessarily like killing them or anything, but I can't have ants in my house, and I didn't know what to do. And then in my email is a blog from Penelope Smith talking about how you can talk to the heads, the leaders of these groups, and that whether it's the queen ant or the head of the worker ants. So I'm not looking at them. I don't know them, but I just kind of imagine them kind of sitting at a table in front of me. And I said, look, we got to talk. Like, you can't keep coming in here. I don't want to kill you guys. And then they were telling me how their whole habitat had been upended under the house. and that they were just disturbed and they didn't know where to go, right? So they're just going everywhere. So we just kind of talked about now if you ask me like exactly what it's like, I don't know. I was just kind of intuitively having the conversation. And in the almost 5 years I've been here, I get a little bit maybe sometimes in the kitchen, but no ants. And I try to have the same conversation with spiders, but they don't really have a leader. So it's almost like an individual conversation, when I'm seeing them. Uh, so that's like another like way of communicating, like they're like with the energy, just like you might with plants or something else. So it's not like it's a specific thing to animals. It's just connecting in with the energy. And then when I became a medium, connecting with animals that have passed, it is different from people. One, there's a lot of things when I started connecting with people that had passed, um, like kind of blew my belief about a lot of things. Like when we cross over, that we, become healed and we're awesome. And now, we're these beautiful souls. It's like, no, we're still pretty much us. We have that opportunity to evolve. Um, but we still, my sister, oh my God, she was obsessed with hats in her lifetime. That's, half of what we talk about. Like, oh, I got to look at her hats. She's like, oh, how do you like this one? It's like, it's great, just like when you're here, but she still loves to talk about it. Um, so with animals, they're so pure in their soul that when they cross over, they are like that. They're they're healed, but they still carry their personality. So oftentimes when somebody is trying to, wants to connect, oh, also I can't control necessarily who comes through. So they might want to talk to one pet that's passed, but then another pet comes in, or another person, uh, but so often they don't come in because I am start out pretty visual. So I describe like what they look like, but with animals, they don't necessarily look the way they looked in this lifetime. So I don't know if it's because they're reincarnating quickly, but oftentimes how they show themselves is how their personality was. So that thing like a Chihuahua showing up like a Great Dane, like that has happened, you know? And I'm like, it's, like, because I don't know. I used to, and I think I still have it on my website where if it's an animal, if you can send me a picture where I can see their eyes. Well, I started asking for that because that's what somebody asked me when I was at a psychic fair and I want someone to give me a reading about my dogs or read one of my dogs. That's what they asked for. It wasn't because I thought, but I'm like, well, there must be something to that, so that's what I'll ask for. So turns out it doesn't matter, but I think it's one of those things that made me feel a little more confident, if I could see their eyes. So then, of course, I see them. So now, especially if they passed, I don't like to know what anybody looks like or anything because I want to describe it so the person knows that I'm talking to their person, right? Um, so now I don't necessarily request that. Um, and animals that are not past, that are present, I do oftentimes will ask for a picture of them because there is something in the energy. Oh, because I don't do any in-person um, healings or readings with animals because I have two dogs myself. I also feel like animals do better in their own environment. Like I'll really be reading them where they feel the most comfortable versus stressing them out. Um, but I did work at a metaphysical store in Sacramento for about 6 years, and a lot of people did bring their animals in because they're walking them along the street and stuff. So I have done it, but don't need to, right? Energy is everywhere. So most of the time, they might be in their car, asking me about their cats, or their cat's not in their car with them. So I ask them to send me a picture where I just feel like I can connect with their energy more directly. Um, so it's now there's like if somebody wants a resource to learn animal communication, I have like 3 or 4 that I've collected that specifically do that. So it's definitely a growing field of doing animal communication. And if any of you are pet owners, like, like we'll spend a lot of money, we'll do a lot of things, for our animals. But it is, I will say, some of the more heartbreaking part of my business is working with animals, because things like where, even owners that have the best intentions, um, oftentimes are creating the challenge that the pet's experiencing because of their energy or their fears or the stuff they're going through. And animals, they and I just have to tell myself, that I know their pets signed up for this, like this was their agreement to be with this person. It's kind of how I have to deal with it, and then I can do what I can for the pet and offer. I just a couple of weeks ago had a client when I asked her dog, who was actually appeared really quite healthy, and everything she was asking about is the dog just needed training. He wasn't trying to be a bad dog, but she felt like the dog didn't like her. And when you take it personally that your pet doesn't like you, like now it affects all your interactions, like he's doing these things deliberately to you, when he was really just a powerful dog with a really strong breed type and personality. And she was she was a vegan, and nothing wrong with vegans, love vegans. I'm almost sometimes one. But it's very light energy, right? It's very, very light, which is the beautiful thing about being a vegan. But with a dog that is like, a cane corso that needs a leader, that needs you to tell him what to do, just, he doesn't listen, he doesn't want to listen. So I'm, trying to help her understand, like, you got to get a different voice, like there's ways to do that. But then as I get to the part, like, what is he like? And I asked him about his food, and he was like, meh, and I said, he's, I don't know. When I asked him about his food, he was like, "Oh, it's okay." She goes, "Oh yeah, I know he doesn't like it because she feeds him a vegan diet." And yeah, I was like, it was pretty, like, I know I kind of reacted like, she's like, "Well, he's an extension of me," and and it's like, so I get it. We know those people, and I probably am that person sometimes, not necessarily with my pets, um, but I did look it up afterwards, and they say if he's getting all the proper nutrition, it's actually can be a very healthy diet. Like, he doesn't like it. So, which, to be fair, if he had to be on a prescription diet, he probably wouldn't like that either. So I don't know. I feel like that's sometimes the hardest part. And I'm sure for you, even working with clients, sometimes it's the hardest part because we're our worst enemy. All we have to do is like drink more water, and we don't, or, different things. But it's harder to influence somebody who has a pet that with the information the pet gets, that maybe they'll make some changes. So I wish it happened every time, but just like human nature, it doesn't. Um, uh, but I just take my role as what I can do, and at least they're asking, they're asking for help. And maybe something comes from it. So I don't know, that's kind of the downside of it. And I do have to say, there was one time, I had a client that she emailed me, she was distraught, she had lost her pet, and it hadn't been very long. And I know even with people, if they come shortly after, they're so heavy in grief that oftentimes it's difficult to connect with their loved one, whether it's a pet or a person. It's difficult to connect with them because, or we can connect, but what they need is something so great that that connection may not give them the peace that they're looking for. So I'm always a little bit like, maybe we should wait a little bit, let you kind of process some of it. But she was really upset, and this was in the winter. One of the things about my house, it's not well insulated. It has all the original windows, so it's either too cold or too hot. I really don't get many days in between. So it was pretty cold. She came in, she had a blanket around her, so I didn't think too much about it. And then we're kind of into the reading a pretty good amount, and her husband's with her, and she's sitting next to me. And all of a sudden I realize he's like looking at me and then looking at the blanket around her, and he's looking at me and he's looking at and I'm like, oh my God, she brought him the doll that had passed a few days before. And she didn't say it, but finally I asked, I said, I said, is that him there? And she couldn't let him go. And the and I've seen her several times since then and still quite distraught. I had to put her, connect her with a grief therapist because she was just beside herself. And it was just really hard to see how devastated she was and blaming herself, which is the other thing we do with pets. There's always a lot of guilt. And I think that's what readings do help with a lot of times is when the pet's saying, no, there's nothing you could have done. There was no way you would have known you did the right thing. Like they honor their owners in that way. But that was a first, and I hope a last. But the husband did reach out and tell me that after our session, she was able to take him to the vet and let them cremate him so that she could keep him. So that was awkward. So anyway, so I don't know. That's kind of my story. And I know, all of you have a connection with the energy, but I don't know if there's anything particular that you want to ask about animals or anything else.
If anyone has questions, sure. And of course, Kaya.
Susie,
I have too many questions, honestly. I'm not kidding. I wouldn't know exactly where to start, but I will. Okay.
Limit it to one at a time because we have other people. So
we have other people.
Oh no.
Other people with questions.
Well,
one question, Kaya.
Okay, I'll start with something a little more complicated. I had a cat who passed from kidney disease, and which is very common, and I was incredibly dedicated to her. Oh, anyway, and I was part of a kidney disease group online. Yeah, there's a big one. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, I mean, this is only the bare bones of the story. And she did have to leave, and we did a euthanasia, or I don't know what the right word is. It doesn't feel right to me.
None
And
of it feels right. Yeah.
well, I did ritual and I did a whole lot of, I'm not a person who cries easily at all. And I could not stop crying. But I mean, in any case, Zoe, she's amazing. She still is with me. I just
Yep.
know, and I did a shamanic journeying in one of the classes with Annie Blackstone. And that's when I first got acquainted with HCH again. This is my second round, so to speak. And Zoe was with me.
Yeah.
She she was walking. This is obviously she was walking in a cave right next to me. We did a journey. It was my first journey with her, and she was big. She was big. She's a Siamese cat. She was brown, but she was big. And
They
so,
have big personalities, so I'm not surprised.
yeah. Anyway, I was thinking that I might want to offer some of the people who are going, they just, I know what happens. The kind of grief that a person feels
Yeah.
is it's like nothing else. I get it. And I was thinking about offering them hypnosis for free to see how that would work. There is something that it's called at the school, speaking with the dead. I don't care for the title, but I've done it with humans. And it would give the person who has lost the animal the possibility of crossing over to where the animal really is still is, and having communication. And I wouldn't do it right away. I agree with you. I think you said something about they need to have the first waves of their grief. That's the way I would experience it myself. But this is something I have not done. I would want to, of course, ask the person who owns the website, who's cited the email group, and see if it would be something that would be workable. Because I think I would like to do something like that. I don't have any idea. I mean, I do Reiki on my cat, right? The one that I have now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyway, I have lots of other things to talk about and say.
Let's see if we can come
I'll,
back to you,
no,
Kaya.
no,
That
I'm
sounds
stopping.
interesting. It sounds
I'm
interesting.
stopping. But
Okay,
that's the idea that I am playing with right now.
good
Yeah,
idea.
try it.
Yeah, sounds interesting.
Thank
And
you.
we're going to move on to Susie.
Hi, thanks so much. I love this. I don't know whether to ask well, I can ask whether you can communicate with animals that have passed like 25 years ago, because I was literally on July 9th was the birthday of our Saint Bernard who died
Oh.
26 years ago. And I don't know, I still feel grief because my husband used to keep him outside and it was winter and I didn't think he should be. And my husband said,
Yeah.
oh, he's a Saint Bernard, he's fine, he was 8 years old. But then our bird just died, who was 7. Our parakeet died June 2nd, and it was like I couldn't keep him because I have a lung issue, and I loved him so much. And another friend who's an animal communicator said, "Oh, he left because he knew you couldn't keep him, and you were going to have to rehome him." But I don't know if you. That's my question: is can you communicate with Bear from 26 years ago, or not? Or
Yes, it's one of those things that even in a mediumship class that I'm taking, like an advanced class, somebody talked about that they were shocked that like somebody came through to them, a grandfather that, well, one that they didn't know, but also that they had passed like 30 years ago. It's like nothing on the other side in my experience. Time really isn't the same as ours, so it's not, because we think it's all about recent, like that's who's going to come through, but it's doesn't matter at all the amount of time that they're gone. I think it's more challenging when it's more recent, because it's not just us, the person here that lost them that's grieving. Oftentimes the person that died is grieving. They're on the other side, unless they've maybe had time to prepare or made peace with it. But oftentimes if it's an accident, it's shocking to them. It's like, whoa, I was there cooking breakfast and now I'm here. And so it's oftentimes I feel like it takes a little while to kind of have something to even say, because they have to kind of process their own deaths. So your friend that talked about your bird, understanding that they were going to have to go one way or the other, and that they took the decision away from you.
yeah,
I feel like animals do that, where, oftentimes when they get sick, it's like there's nothing that can be done. Like they're taking the decision away from you to euthanize, right? So that which I think is such a blessing, to not have that guilt. But your grief, you talked about, like, I'm still grieving. I don't think you're grieving. I think you're guilting still after, right?
yeah.
Which shows up as I still feel bad
It'd be
that I
years.
didn't stand up for him, or I didn't make it, or, so you need to forgive yourself first off. You really do, because he and your husband had their contract. And oftentimes, St. Bernard, I imagine he probably was okay outside, chances are. But when I would never leave my dogs outside. I don't care if they're meant to be outside or not,
Not
because that's
anymore,
not
yeah.
how I am.
They sleep with us now. The dogs sleep
Right.
with us now. But then,
Right. But a lot of, I find it more so with men that, like they want, tough dog, or, I mean, growing up, my uh stepfather, it was just a short period of time I lived with them, but it was in Mississippi. He raised championship hunting dogs. And the ones worth the most money were right in front of the house along the driveway. And they were like in tin barrels, chained to the barrels. So they slept in the barrel, and these were dogs worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they this was, this is how you treated them, like that's how they were treated. And of course, our family pet that all of a sudden now couldn't be in the house, it was in the barn. I called my dad. I said, you got to come and get her. Like, she's not going to make it here, because she was a house dog, right? And that wasn't how she grew up, so, or her agreement. So dogs can thrive in that. So you maybe this is an opportunity for you to go, you know what? I took as good a care of that dog as I knew at the time. And the dog holds never any animosity about, I mean, we can treat them badly and they still show up for us.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I literally every July 9th, I feel bad for that poor dog, because now we keep our dog in the bed with us, and then back then it was like, I feel so bad that, he was so huge and it would just like wag his tail and knock over furniture. And it was like,
Yeah.
I feel
And I have a similar thing with my first dog. It has an adult that Mary might remember, Jessie, the lab. I had a dog run built on the side of the house, and she did spend a lot of time outside. And I look back now, it's like I was so stressed out when I bought that house on my own. I had a big job. I was so stressed out all the time that Jessie originally was in a crate in my room, but she would like lick and wake me up. And I like couldn't handle it. It was like too much. So I put her in the garage, or I put her, and I just think about, oh my God, like I was the worst. I would never, but I didn't know a lot, about what it would take or what I should do. And, and I remember the look of my vet when he saw like a place on her elbow didn't have the hair on it. Right. And I'll never forget that look, that, it was definitely disgusted at me, kind of thing. But I can't, I didn't know. Now I know. Right. So we have, just like stuff with our kids, like we have to let go, because, we're not perfect.
So you don't get that he died because my husband forgot to feed him that night. That's what's the worst, is he was hungry and cold, so that was like, we came home from a party and he had passed away. He was 8, and he's a really big
Well, and St. Bernard's, that would be a typical life for a St. Bernard is 8 years old. Those big dogs don't, that big, they don't live that long. And I will tell you, missing one meal, no. I guarantee he could have gone a week, 2 weeks, whatever, like they have a lot on them. I mean, do they like to eat? I think when I had Jessie, she got fed once a day. My vet was fine with it. Now I couldn't imagine it. My dogs get twice a day, I don't know, but it's how it was. So don't think like, I know you're thinking about how the dog was feeling because you're sensitive and you're connected, but I feel like because he died that night, and I can certainly, when we're done with questions, I can connect in with him or try to, but chances are he just went quickly, like a heart attack or, something that just happened that it was time. Because if he had been fed that night, you would still feel bad because he was outside, and maybe you didn't discover him right away because he was outside, right? So, could we have done something if he was inside and we knew he was struggling? But I will guarantee that it wasn't meant to go that way.
Well, thank you. That's 26 years of big relief from me. Thank you. Thanks.
I'm sorry.
That's super. Kate has a question.
I do. I'm a firm believer that the animals are part of the angelic realm. They're in the same place as those that have crossed over, those that are your angels, that are your guides, and that they all communicate with each other. And then that it's all part of this team effort to teach us in human form how to live a spiritual life.
Yeah.
So even though we might have them for a month, a minute, a lifetime, they're not gone.
No, never.
They are still connected to us. In fact, I was going to ask Susie if you ever stand up and kind of stumble over something that's not there. because he gives me the impression that he kind of gets in the way, like what you're talking about with the tail wagging. And you think you're just being clumsy, or you think you've, stepped on something and caught yourself before you fell. But it's actually him reminding you that you are loved and that you will be continued to be loved through all of that experience, because their commitment to us is the same commitment as our guardian angels. It is to provide a lifetime of eons of years of love, because we are so loved by them. As we love them, they love us, and they continue to still be in our energy, in our homes, in our cars, running around. My cat likes to go have play dates with a lizard that we call Liz. She's going to go play with Liz now. And when she doesn't come back, because she's supposed to come back, because she knows she's supposed to come back before it gets dark, because we have mountain lions, I ask my guides to go get her and send her back. And she returns within 5 minutes every time. Every time. If the two cats start to have a fight, I ask my guides to intercede and clear that up. Whatever that was, whatever they are fighting over, I don't need to know, but it needs to stop before somebody gets hurt. Okay, so in communicating with them, and communicating with guides, communicating with angels, communicating with souls that have crossed over to the other side, it really is just a trusting in the conversation. A conversation of asking and then listening, and listen to what comes back in. So my question for you, Nancy, is when you're doing this communication, do you think you're actually hearing the spirits, the spirit of the animal, or do you think it's your guides explaining the spirit, the animal spirit?
So, it's interesting conversation about that, right? So in mediumship, or how, and I've had didn't have any teachers. Like when I came back from Peru, I just went with what I got, right? And then I think it was about 4 years in, and I went, oh, maybe I met some evidential mediums, and I was like, what's evidential? Like, I didn't know any of the lingo, and then it was like, oh, maybe I should learn something. Maybe there's something I could learn. And so with these different teachers and how they talk about when you're connecting with those on the other side is like, I feel like I have my psychic that kind of ends up here, that is just kind of this knowing. And then the mediumship, I feel like my soul blends with their soul. So I don't feel like I have a go between. I do have guides that I feel like help me in my mediumship, but I feel like they help me. They help me to get out of my head. They help me to question, what I'm getting, my ego getting out of the way. But I do feel, because I feel what they're conveying, like that wasn't a big, like that's developed over time. Is like where they're giving me feelings of things. So I feel like our souls are connected. So I do feel like it's exactly what you're saying. Like we're part of them, they're part of us. That energy never leaves. But I feel like the hardest people, even for those of us who believe in all of this, is to trust what we're getting, right? Like we know that it's true, but then our ego and our mind and our humanness struggles oftentimes. So it's the one part of my work. So healing work, like it's like I have confidence. My psychic work, I have a lot of confidence in. And I'm working with my guides or their guides. Like I have no, like I know I'm not doing it. I'm getting that information through guides. That I do know. But mediumship is always, when I'm getting ready to do a reading for somebody, always a little bit nervous because I have zero control. Zero. Like whatever's going to come in is going to come in. I can't make it. I can't stop it. It's never failed for somebody to come through, but like, what if, oftentimes you're like, well, no, that doesn't remind me of anybody, or no, I didn't have any pets like that. No, 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 no. And it's like we all get amnesia at the same time. And then a little while in, they're like, oh, wait, that might be my mom's dog, right? You know, or my mom, you know, somebody they weren't expecting, or because it's been 25 years, you know, that wasn't who I was expecting to come in. So it's just building that trust and that connection in the trust, just like what you said. It's like just knowing that's what that is. But I think that's a lifetime, you know, I don't know, feels like a lifetime of having that confidence.
That's great. That's great. We're going to take one more question and then I'm going to stop the recording,
Okay.
but we'll see if there's anyone else that has other questions after that. So Angela, go ahead.
I have a cat right now, and the rule at night is he has to come in. He likes to be outside. So, because, you know, I don't want him eaten by a coyote or something. And I light a candle and tell him I love him. And I talk to him through the light of the flame of the candle. I don't feel that there's anybody in between, but, you know, I take care of my daughter's dogs. I have a big connection with most animals. I just don't know what step to take next in my animal communication journey.
So I love that you found your method, just like you send your guys to go get them. Like, I wish I could tell my clients, like, well, just ask your spirit guys to go get them, you know, is there'd be like, what? You know, like, well, first I got to know my spirit guys. So for you, it's like, you know, I kind of light a candle, I talk to them, because I think most people with pets, they could consider themselves intuitives, because we're always like telling the story about why our pets are doing what they're doing. Like, because that's the only communication we have. I think sometimes we project a story onto them, but what you're doing is exactly what you should be doing, is just having that conversation. And then maybe it's the listening, right? That you brought up, that what do they want to tell you? Because it might feel one-sided where I'm telling him what I want to do, but you know he'd rather be outside. So he is conveying that either by not coming, or you just know that about him. But he comes in for you. You know, this is the contract that you guys have, or the relationship that you have. And so I think it's just doing it more, and then just seeing what you get, and then trying not to dismiss it. It's I feel like everything that we do, and Mary, you know, you can throw in yours, like as a healer, like at first we feel like we're just waving our arms at stuff, right? Or when you're using Reiki, you're doing all these symbols, but you're like, you know, until somebody gives you feedback, like, oh wow, I feel a lot better, or, you know, I feel lighter, I feel something. But with pets, you know, we don't get that, so we have to trust. So the more you practice it and get what you get more often, then we start to trust it. So Angela, I feel like that's all that's really missing, because you have, you know, you have beautiful energy. So I know the animals like you, they like your energy. So how they are with you gives you that opportunity to, they'll tell you all their problems. I feel like that's what they're going to do to you, Angela, because I think that's what people do to you. But I feel like your animals, especially your daughters, will come up and go, she didn't let me on the bed last night. You know, like, she doesn't give me treats like you do, Grandma. You know, because there's like things you see on Facebook like that. Like, let me tell you what happened. I feel like they do that to you.
I can be walking downtown and a dog will just put his paws on me, and I just need to learn to listen and trust that. But yeah, they do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just that hello when they do that, going, yes, I see you. I see you. Because I think animals, just as much as people, like, they want to know we see them in some way. It's great.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I'm going to thank anybody that wants to leave at this point, but I'm going to turn off the recording. Recording. Stop.